With the release of Classic on the horizon, I've seen a lot of people speculating what happens after Naxxramas comes out. How does WoW Classic move forward? What are the paths? And from what I've seen currently in online discussions on both Reddit and the WoW forums, the community is a bit divided into two camps. One is going into TBC, but there is a newer movement that would eventually consider another path going into a eventual patch 1.13 and continuing the vanilla timeline. So in this video we will look a little bit at what the consequences of each path would look like. And yes, this is just a PowerPoint presentation, it will not be the most visually interesting experience, but please bear with me and hear me out. So, whether you're leaning towards TBC or 1.13, the baseline will always be the same. It's WoW Classic 1.12, Naxxramas is out. Now, I think this is something that the whole community more or less agrees on, that this is a version that should be always available, and people should basically be able to play this forever-ish if they wish to do so. So let's first go the obvious route and continue towards the Burning Crusade. What would the release of the Burning Crusade mean? So at some point the first Burning Crusade patch would release, and probably the majority of players would migrate towards the Burning Crusade because it was still a good expansion and a lot of people really enjoyed it and want to re-experience it. But I think there will be also a minority that would like to stick with 1.12. So there is likely to be a player divisioning happening at this point, and I don't think this is avoidable. And then what? At some point, the Burning Crusade will be near the end of its life cycle, and what do we do next? Well, obviously, there will be people who will demand a Wrath server. So, Blizzard will probably pop up Wrath servers, and again, there will be player divisioning happening. Some people will stick with the Burning Crusade because they didn't like features in Wrath, and some people will migrate. So we'll have further divisioning happening on the whole spectrum of the legacy server front. But you know, Wrath was still quite a good expansion and people also really enjoyed it. But what next? Like, if we spin this down further, do we go towards Cataclysm? I think there are very, very, very few people who would like to go that route, and maybe it would lead to a further fracturing of the player base. Maybe not. Different options, a brand new expansions based on the first trilogy of World of Warcraft. Would that turn out good? Would you be comfortable with a new expansions? How do we continue? Do we just keep this trilogy forever? So, as you can see, a release of the Burning Crusade seems really good at first glance, but it might cause a lot of problems further down the line, because we will have unavoidably people who will ask for Wrath servers, who will maybe ask for Cataclysm servers, and do we really want to go down that rabbit hole? Do we want to have a new expansions? How would that turn out? Like, there are so many unanswered questions. And like, I think once you went the route of the TBC, there is no turning back, because like, you cannot go like 1.13, because then people who play the Burning Crusade would also want a patch based on the Burning Crusade maybe. And people on Wrath would also want their own new patch with new content based on Wrath of the Lich King philosophy. So you would end up with this mess, with a divided player base and no real way of turning back, other than like a really full reset, like World of Warcraft 2 or something like that. That would be cool in itself, but again, that's maybe a topic for another video. For now, we'll stick with this. So let's look at the alternative of the Burning Crusade. A 1.13 patch. Also, a division of player base is probably unavoidable, just because I think it's important that 1.12 is preserved and will always be available for people to come back. Now, a lot of people raise concerns that a potential 1.13 patch would have similar issues as a new expansion has. Like, how can we make sure that a 1.13 patch is unaffected by the philosophy of modern WoW development and is rather based on 1.12? So how can we make sure that people who enjoy 1.12 will also enjoy 1.13? And to answer that question, I think we'll have to dig a little bit deeper into the philosophy of expansions, and that's what we're gonna do now. So expansions are a great thing for Blizzard, because not only can they get new money from your subscriptions, but they can also sell you brand new content as an expansion set and therefore get additional revenue, which pleases shareholders, and so the company is happy. So the concept of expansions is really good for Blizzard, but it poses some problems in terms of design, because in order to sell an expansions, you need to provide something that's worth purchasing it. So you need an expansions that is stacked with content, because otherwise people will just not buy the expansion. So what happens is you will have a really large expansions in general, and the chances are that you will have some rotten eggs in this whole set of features that comes with the expansions. And the more eggs you will have in the basket, the higher the chance that you will have some rotten eggs. And in the case of the Burning Crusade, I'm talking about things like flying. Seems great at first glance. Everybody was excited for flying when it was announced, but further down, people realized that flying caused issues, like it made you be able to skip large parts of the world. So like you could fly over potentially dangerous mobs, and therefore for the world would feel less dangerous. And also it had a huge impact on open world PvP. But it's not only flying, you also have like this brand new continent to explore, Outland. Seems great, a whole new continent to explore, fresh content, but later on people realized that with the introduction of Outland, the existing continent got emptier. So the whole player base was basically spent their time in Outland, getting to level 70, do this brand new content, experience this brand new content, and the whole old content, which was present here in 1.12, kind of become obsolete. And you know, for a lot of players, this feels like home. And this also feels like home. And players, especially WoW players, like to go home from time to time and spend time at home. And for a lot of players, this doesn't feel so much like home. And certainly nobody likes to have their home ravaged like this. So we had a couple of rotten eggs here in the Burning Crusade, which went quite unnoticed and only became prevalent as a issue a little bit later on. So then at some point Wrath released, and it also had some rotten eggs. We'll not go further into detail about those. I think most people know what I'm talking about. And each new expansions had their fair share of additional rotten eggs that got added within the expansion. And another issue is that it is not easy for Blizzard to actually clean up those rotten eggs, because maybe a lot of content or features on a given expansions depend on a certain rotten eggs to be present. And if you would remove those eggs, then the whole expansions would fall apart. We've seen that happen. So the quintessence what I'm trying to say here is that if you have a smaller patch like 1.13 would likely be, you would have fewer eggs and maybe one is rotten, but because there are so many fewer eggs, those rotten eggs are spotted much more easily and they can be cleaned up a lot more easily. Now, I don't think this is really enough to ensure that 1.13 would be a success in the same that it would do justice as a follow-up to Vanilla 1.12. I think we will have to look at some really hard design philosophies that Blizzard would have to commit themselves in order to make this a success, but I'm very confident that the probability of this going to be good, if Blizzard would stick to a couple of design philosophies, is pretty damn high. We'll explore some of those design philosophies in the next video, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you understand a little bit of why maybe going in a new direction is probably a better idea rather than just doing what we've already done and what we've seen doesn't work. Why do we want to go a route that we know that leads up to something that we don't like? So with that being said, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, and I hope you see you in the next one. Bye bye.